Have you ever been watching an anime thinking the main character was completely useless, and then out of nowhere he shows up destroying everything in front of him without breaking a sweat? That feeling is too good. Today, I brought you the 20 best recent anime where the protagonist starts at rock bottom and ends up as an absolute force of nature. No classics you already know by heart. Only releases from the last few years that deserve way more attention than they get. Stay until the end. The top spots on this list are the most insane ones. Let's get into it. Failure Frame. Let's kick things off with one of the most underrated revenge stories in recent isekai history. Imagine being summoned as a hero, lined up in front of an entire kingdom, and ranked dead last. Rank E, the absolute bottom of the barrel. Everyone else in your class gets flashy, powerful abilities. You get skills so weak that the goddess herself decides you're not worth keeping alive. So she throws you into a dungeon called the Disposal Pit, a place designed to be a death sentence, and wipes her hands clean of you. That's the opening of Failure Frame, and it sets the tone for everything that followed. Now here's where it gets interesting. Momorituka doesn't die. He survives the pit, and in doing so, he starts to understand something nobody else in that world ever figured out. His ranky skills, the ones everyone laughed at, can be pushed and combined in ways that completely break the game. The show was produced by 7 Arcs, directed by Michio Fukuda, and the script was written by Yasuhiro Nakanishi, the same writer behind Kaguya-sama, Love is War. And that background shows. Nakanishi knows how to build a character with layers, and Momori is not your typical reluctant hero who eventually forgives his enemies and moves on. He doesn't want redemption for anyone but himself. He wants revenge, methodically, against every single person in that chain, from the king who approved the disposal all the way up to the goddess who made the call. What makes this work as a power fantasy is the escalation. Every time Momori encounters something new, you watch him figure it out, adapt, and come out the other side stronger and colder. The show doesn't try to make him likable in a conventional sense. It makes him compelling, which is so much better. If you like your isekai with actual bite and a protagonist who isn't here to make friends, this one is essential. The Faraway Paladin. This is probably the most emotionally mature anime on this entire list, and I don't think it gets nearly enough credit for that. The setup alone is unlike anything else in the genre. Will is the only living human in a dead city. He's being raised by 3 undead creatures. Blood, a skeleton warrior who teaches him how to fight. Mary, a mummified priestess who teaches him about faith and healing. And Gus, a grumpy old ghost sorcerer who pushes him academically and magically. These 3 were once powerful figures in the world, now trapped in a forgotten city at the edge of civilization, and Will is the first sign of life they've had in centuries. The first several episodes are almost entirely about this relationship, about how 3 beings who have already lived their lives and died pour everything they have left into raising this child. It's warm, it's earned, and it makes you genuinely care about Will before he ever picks up a sword in a serious fight. The anime was produced by Children's Playground Entertainment, directed by Yunobuta, written by Tatsuya Takahashi, with music composed by Monica, the same team behind Oregaru's soundtrack. That musical foundation gives the quieter, emotional moments a weight that a lot of action anime just doesn't bother with. When Will eventually leaves the city and enters the wider world, the foundation those 3 built in him starts showing in everything he does. His approach to combat, to faith, to other people, it all traces back to those early lessons. And his power growth isn't handed to him. He works for it, he earns every bit of it, and because you've watched the entire process from the very beginning, each milestone hits with real impact. If you're burned out on isekai protagonists who are strong for no reason, this is the antidote. Seirei Gensuki, Spirit Chronicles. Spirit Chronicles runs on a premise that sounds complicated on paper but clicks almost immediately once you're watching it. Ryo is a young orphan boy living in the slums of a fantasy kingdom. No family, no money, no prospects, surviving purely through sheer willpower and street smarts. And then, completely out of nowhere, he wakes up one morning with a full second set of memories. Everything belonging to Haruto Amakawa, a Japanese college student from our world who died in a traffic accident. 2 lives, 2 completely different worldviews, 2 different sets of skills and knowledge, all crammed into one kid's head. What the show does smartly is use that duality as Ryo's actual power. It's not that he suddenly gets a magic cheat ability or stumbles into legendary gear. It's that he now thinks differently from everyone around him. Haruto's modern sensibilities and logical thinking combine with Ryo's raw survival instincts and the physical training he's been doing since childhood. And the result is someone who simply processes the world better than his peers. He starts noticing things others miss, solving problems others give up on, and learning magic at a pace that makes his instructors deeply uncomfortable. The anime was produced by TMS Entertainment, the studio also behind Dr. Stone, directed by Osamu Yamasaki, and came back for a second season in 2024 under director Hiroshi Kubo. The two seasons together give you a surprisingly complete arc. Rio doesn't start strong, and he doesn't become a god overnight. It's a gradual climb, and the world he's climbing through has enough political intrigue, personal vendettas, and layered history to keep things interesting well beyond just the power progression. It's one of those anime where you realize halfway through the first season that you're actually invested in the world, not just the fights. A returner's magic should be special. The premise of a returner's magic hits you immediately and doesn't let go. Desser Armin was part of the last group of survivors inside the Shadow Labyrinth, a dungeon so dangerous and so incomprehensibly difficult that it functionally ended humanity. Almost everyone died. Desser made it out, but only barely, and only after watching everyone he cared about get wiped out one by one. And then, right after surviving the impossible, he wakes up 13 years in the past, back when he was a student before any of it happened. Now here's what makes this different from other time loop or reincarnation setups. Desser doesn't just know the future in a vague, general sense. He spent years inside the most brutal dungeon in existence. He has combat knowledge, strategic knowledge, magical theory, and an understanding of how catastrophically wrong things can go that no one else in the world possesses. He's not a student who happens to know a few spoilers. He's a veteran who's been dropped back into his own past. This was produced by Wit Studio, the same team behind Attack on Titan and Vinland Saga, directed by Masumi Ando and scripted by Rintaro Ikeda. The production quality is immediately visible. The fights are well choreographed, the magic system is internally consistent, and the show trusts its audience to follow the strategy without over-explaining everything. What really makes it work, though, is the gap between what Desser knows and what everyone around him sees. To his classmates, he's a mildly talented student who punches above his weight class. To anyone paying close attention, he's someone operating in a completely different dimension. That slow reveal of just how far ahead of everyone he actually is executed with real patience and real payoff. The iceblade sorcerer shall rule the world. This one lives and dies on the execution of a single concept, and it executes it very well. The setup. Ray White is the only commoner to ever gain admission to Arnold Academy, an elite institution where the student body is made up almost entirely of noble-born mages from powerful families. From day one, he's treated as an outsider, an anomaly, something that doesn't belong. The noble kids make their contempt clear. The faculty keeps a careful eye on him, and Ray just takes it quietly without pushing back. What nobody in that school knows, and what the audience finds out relatively early, is that Ray is the iceblade sorcerer, one of the 7 great sages, the most powerful classification of mage that exists in that world, a title held by only 7 people at any given time. He enrolled under a fake identity specifically to live a normal school life, to have the kind of mundane academic experience he never got to have while carrying the weight of being one of the world's most feared individuals. He's not hiding because he's weak. He's hiding because he wanted 1 year of being a normal student. The anime was produced by Cloud Hearts and directed by Masato Jinbo. The show is smart enough to not milk the secret forever. When the reveals come, they come with impact. And the real pleasure of watching this isn't in the mystery itself, it's in the moment-to-moment experience of watching someone enormously powerful exercise massive restraint, and then occasionally deciding that restraint has limits. The faces of the antagonists when they push him too far and find out exactly what they poked are genuinely worth the price of admission alone. The iceblade sorcerer shall rule the world. This one lives and dies on the execution of a single concept, and it executes it very well. The setup. Ray White is the only commoner to ever gain admission to Arnold Academy, an elite institution where the student body is made up almost entirely of noble-born mages from powerful families. From day one, he's treated as an outsider, an anomaly, something that doesn't belong. The noble kids make their contempt clear. The faculty keeps a careful eye on him, and Ray just takes it quietly without pushing back. What nobody in that school knows, and what the audience finds out relatively early, is that Ray is the iceblade sorcerer, one of the 7 great sages, the most powerful classification of mage that exists in that world, a title held by only 7 people at any given time. He enrolled under a fake identity specifically to live a normal school life, to have the kind of mundane academic experience he never got to have while carrying the weight of being one of the world's most feared individuals. He's not hiding because he's weak. He's hiding because he wanted 1 year of being a normal student. The anime was produced by Cloud Hearts and directed by Masato Jinbo. The show is smart enough to not milk the secret forever. When the reveals come, they come with impact. And the real pleasure of watching this isn't in the mystery itself, it's in the moment-to-moment experience of watching someone enormously powerful exercise massive restraint, and then occasionally deciding that restraint has limits. The faces of the antagonists when they push him too far and find out exactly what they poked are genuinely worth the price of admission alone. I got a cheat skill in another world. This anime is unambiguous about what it is. It's not trying to be deep. It's not trying to subvert the genre. It is a pure, unfiltered wish fulfillment fantasy, and it delivers on that promise more completely than most shows in this space even attempt. Yuya Tenju has one of the roughest starting points on this list, and that's saying something given the competition. He's been the target of relentless bullying his entire school life. His family treats him as an afterthought. He has no friends, and he's been living in a state of quiet misery for years. The one person who genuinely cared about him was his grandfather, who just passed away. While going through his grandfather's belongings, Yuya discovers a door in the old man's house. A door that leads to another world, one left behind by an ancient civilization filled with items, weapons, and artifacts of power that were never meant to be found by anyone. And because he's the first person to enter in centuries, everything is his for the taking. The items he finds there don't just make him powerful in the fantasy world, they physically transform him in the real world too. Stronger, faster, healthier, taller, his entire appearance changes. And when he goes back to school, nobody recognizes him. Produced by Millipensi and written by Keiichiro Oki, the show doesn't shy away from the fantasy it's selling. The idea that the person everyone overlooked gets to become someone nobody can ignore is cathartic in a way that doesn't need justification. Not every anime has to challenge you. Sometimes you just want to watch the underdog become untouchable, and this one gives you exactly that across two worlds simultaneously. My isekai life commits to a specific vibe and never wavers from it, which is honestly one of the most underrated qualities an anime can have. Yuji Sano was the kind of overworked Japanese salary worker that's become almost a cultural archetype, clocking over 300 hours a month, no social life, no hobbies, just work and sleep and back again. When he gets transported to another world mid-task, his first instinct is basically to see if he can finish his assignment remotely. That's the kind of guy we're dealing with. He gets assigned the Tamer class, universally regarded as the bottom of the barrel, a class so weak that most people would reroll immediately. Yuji doesn't bother. He starts taming monsters, and here's the mechanic that changes everything. Every monster he tames gives him that creature's full skill set. Permanently, he starts quietly accumulating abilities at a rate that's almost comical. Healing magic, attack magic, barrier magic, elemental magic, status effects, buffs, debuffs. Within a surprisingly short time, he's unlocked every category of magic that exists and become the world's one and only sage, a classification that was considered theoretical because no one had ever actually achieved it. And then he goes to live in a forest and tends to his slime. That's it. That's the show. The anime was produced by TMS Entertainment and Reborn, written by Kazuyuki Fudayasu of Black Clover fame. The charm isn't in dramatic confrontations or world-ending threats. It's in the absurd gap between what Yuji is capable of and how completely uninterested he is in using it for anything ambitious. When situations do force his hand, the casualness with which he dismantles them is one of the most satisfying recurring gags in recent isekai. A monster that would be a boss fight for anyone else gets handled as an inconvenience before Yuji goes back to making dinner. Otome game sekai wa mob ni kibishii sekai desu. This one requires a tiny bit of context to fully appreciate. An Otome game is a type of visual novel aimed at a female audience, typically built around a female protagonist pursuing romantic relationships with a cast of attractive male characters. Leon, our protagonist, was forced by his sister to not only play one of these games but to fully complete it, every route, every ending, all while being an adult man who absolutely did not want to be doing this. The experience killed him, literally. Sleep deprivation, exhaustion, game over. He reincarnates in the world of that exact game. And the world is deeply unfair to men by design. Women in this setting have access to magic, political power, and social authority, while men are largely ornamental. The game's plot is set up to follow a specific narrative with specific characters in specific roles. Leon has no interest in any of that. What he has is the complete game guide memorized, every mechanic, every hidden item, every event flag, every route, every secret, including the location of an ancient legendary battleship buried under the ocean that was never meant to be accessible in normal gameplay. He goes and gets the ship first, before the story even starts. The anime was produced by Studio ENGI, written by Diko Akeo, who also scripted Noragami, and Akeo has a rare gift for writing protagonists who feel genuinely clever rather than just plot convenient. Leon doesn't stumble into power. He engineers it, using knowledge that nobody else in the world possesses, and he does it with a kind of methodical impatience that makes him genuinely fun to watch. Every time the game's scripted narrative tries to reassert itself, Leon either exploits it, ignores it, or drives a spaceship through it. Skeleton Knight in another world. The hook of Skeleton Knight is immediately compelling and slightly absurd in the best way. A gamer falls asleep at his computer mid-session and wakes up fully inside the game he was playing, except he's not in the body of his character the way you might picture it. His character was a heavily customized knight who, for aesthetic reasons, was wearing a skull mask and bone-themed armor at all times. When he wakes up and tries to remove the helmet to see his face, there's nothing under it. He is the skeleton. The character he made for cosmetic edginess is now his actual body. Ark, the name he takes in world, is max level, fully geared, and functionally unkillable by anything he's likely to encounter. The power ceiling question is basically answered in episode 1. But the show, written by Kazuyuki Fudayasu of Black Clover, isn't really about whether he can win fights. It's about who he is when nobody knows what he is. He covers himself with a full set of armor and a hood, passes as a mysterious masked warrior, and slowly builds a reputation, relationships, and something resembling a life in a world he didn't ask to land in. The tension between his enormous power and his very human desire to connect with people, to have friends, to be trusted, to matter to someone without terrifying them, is the actual engine of the series. There's a melancholy underneath the action that makes the quieter moments land with unexpected weight. When Ark eventually lets certain people in on his secret, it's not a dramatic plot twist. It's something he's been working toward across multiple episodes of earned trust. That patience in the storytelling is what separates this from the average op protagonist does op things show. Vermal in Gold. Let's be upfront. Vermal in Gold has a lot of fan service. That's part of the package, and the show doesn't pretend otherwise. But once you accept the packaging, what's inside is a surprisingly well-constructed power fantasy built on an interesting central dynamic that actually develops into something with real emotional weight by the time the credits roll on the final episode. Alto Goldfield is a magic student with genuine talent for rune magic, but a catastrophic inability to summon a familiar, the key metric by which students are evaluated. He's failed every attempt, he's running out of options, and in a moment of desperation he opens a grimoire that absolutely should not be opened and summons Vermal, a crimson-haired demoness of extraordinary power who has been sealed for hundreds of years. She's not a beginner familiar. She's not even in the same category as any familiar anyone at that school has ever contracted. She's something else entirely. The catch is the energy transfer mechanism. To use Vermal's power, Alto needs to provide her with life energy through direct physical contact, which creates the fan service but also creates a genuine dependency between them that the show uses to slowly build actual character development. The anime was produced by ENGI, same studio as Otome Game Mob, directed by Kenichi Imezumi. What makes the power progression interesting is that it's not just Vermal being strong on Alto's behalf. He's actively absorbing her knowledge, learning from centuries of her magical experience, and growing as a mage at a rate that starts turning heads at the academy. By the end, the question isn't whether Alto is powerful, it's how powerful and in what ways and what he'll do with it. Trapped in a dating sim, if Otome Game Mob felt like a controlled demolition of genre conventions, Trapped in a Dating Sim is the same building being blown up from the inside with a much larger charge. Leon's backstory is almost identical. Forced to play an Otome game, died from exhaustion. But the world he wakes up in and the chaos he causes are on a different scale entirely. In this world, women are the dominant class in every meaningful sense. Politically, magically, militarily, socially. Men exist largely as status symbols and marriage prospects for noble women. The entire social structure has been engineered around the game's original design, and the game was designed with a specific plot that's meant to play out in a specific way. Leon knows every beat of that plot. He knows where every powerful item is hidden. He knows which characters are secretly dangerous, which nobles are corrupt, and exactly how every arc is supposed to resolve. And his very first move is to locate and claim the legacy weapon that was never supposed to be obtainable in normal gameplay, an ancient aerial battleship sitting forgotten at the bottom of a lake. The anime is produced by ENGI and written by Kenta Ihara, who also wrote Usama Ranking and Saga of Tanya the Evil. Ihara's fingerprints are all over the humor. It's dry, it's sharp, and it trusts the audience to be fast enough to catch the jokes. Leon is not a traditional protagonist. He's not trying to become a hero. He's not trying to romance anyone. He's trying to survive in a world that was designed to treat people like him as disposable, using knowledge nobody else has, and the sheer audacity of his approach to every problem makes this one of the most entertaining shows on the list. The Eminence in Shadow. This is the most conceptually layered anime on the list and also one of the funniest, which is a rare combination. Sid Kajinu's entire arc in his previous life was built around one obsessive fantasy: to be the kind of person who operates from the shadows, not the flashy hero everyone knows about, but the unknown power behind everything. The figure nobody suspects until it's too late. He trained obsessively, pushed himself far beyond normal limits, and died before he got to realize any of it. He reincarnates in a fantasy world with those same obsessions intact. And because he can't resist, he builds an elaborate fictional framework around himself, invents a shadow organization called Shadow Garden, invents a mythological enemy faction called Diabolos, invents a whole secret history of conspiracy and supernatural threat. He recruits followers by feeding them this story, fully expecting none of it to be real. He is playing pretend. He is a grown man in a fantasy world doing elaborate LARPing for his own amusement. Except every single thing he invented is actually real. The conspiracy exists. The enemy faction exists. The secret history exists. His made-up shadow organization stumbled into being the only thing standing between the world and genuine destruction, and Sid has absolutely no idea because he's never paying attention to the actual plot. He's too busy enjoying his own fantasy of being mysterious and cool. The anime was produced by Nexus, scripted by Kenichi Kato, with a soundtrack by Kenichiro Suehiro, same composer as Re-Zero, and that score is doing serious work in the action sequences. When Sid finally acts with full power, no holding back, the combination of the music and the animation creates moments that are genuinely spectacular. And the comedy of him walking away from those moments completely unaware of their significance never gets old. Reborn to master the blade. Here's a premise you don't see often. A reincarnation story where the protagonist doesn't come back to fix past mistakes or achieve some goal they failed at. Emperor Inglis lived a complete life, long reign, massive accomplishments, respected legacy. His one regret was never getting to be a pure warrior. The throne demanded politics, strategy, diplomacy. He was a ruler first and a fighter second his entire life, and on his deathbed, he asks for one thing: to come back as someone who just gets to fight. He's reborn as a girl named Inglis into a noble family, with every memory of his previous life intact. The knowledge of an emperor, the strategic mind of a decades-long ruler, and the soul of someone who genuinely, deeply, with their whole chest, loves combat. Not for victory, not for power, for the fight itself. Inglis approaches every battle with a kind of bright enthusiasm that's almost startling in a genre full of stoic or reluctant protagonists. She doesn't dread powerful enemies. She gets excited about them. The anime was produced by Geek Toys and directed by Shigeru Kamiya. The power progression feels natural because it's driven entirely by her own appetite for challenge. She doesn't grow stronger because the plot demands it. She grows stronger because she keeps seeking out opponents who push her limits, and she treats every loss or near loss as an exciting puzzle to solve. There's a lightness to her character that makes the action sequences feel genuinely joyful rather than just impressive, which is a tonal trick that's much harder to pull off than it looks. Reign of the Seven Spellblades. Reign of the Seven Spellblades is the most narratively serious anime on this list, and it earns that seriousness. Oliver Horn arrives at Kimberly Magic Academy with a calm, careful manner, a gift for making friends, and an objective he hasn't shared with anyone. The academy itself is a fascinating setting, prestigious and elite, yes, but also genuinely dangerous. Students have died here. Professors have their own agendas. The curriculum involves magic that can and does go wrong in lethal ways, and the school's administration treats a certain amount of attrition as an acceptable cost of excellence. Oliver's combat style is the physical expression of his character. He combines swordsmanship with spellcasting in a way that nobody else in the school uses, a hybrid approach that makes him unpredictable and difficult to counter. His growth isn't the explosive, rapid kind, it's meticulous, deliberate, the kind of progress that comes from someone with a very specific end goal working backward from the outcome they need. You sense early on that he's not here for the education. He's here for something else entirely. Produced by JC Staff and directed by Shin Unyama, with the script handled by Diko Akeo, who also wrote Ragna Crimson and Noragami. The show has a consistent tonal seriousness that the production respects throughout. Akeo builds the mystery of Oliver's true purpose with real patience, dropping pieces of the larger picture across the whole season. When you finally understand what he's actually there to do, everything you watched before recontextualizes in ways that make you want to go back to the beginning. It's one of those shows where the second viewing is arguably better than the first. Shangri-La Frontier. The concept at the heart of Shangri-La Frontier is so specific and so well executed that it feels fresh even in a genre absolutely saturated with game world anime. Rikuro Hizutome is not a typical gaming prodigy. He's not grinding leaderboards in competitive titles or chasing glory in ranked modes. He specifically seeks out the worst games he can find, the broken ones, the abandoned ones, the ones with terrible UX and game-breaking bugs that the developers never bothered to patch, and then systematically figures out how to beat them at their own broken rules. He's a specialist in exploiting failure. When a friend convinces him to try Shangri-La Frontier, the most technically advanced and mechanically complex VR MMO ever made with a player base of 30 million, Rikuro approaches it the same way he approaches every terrible game. Find the cracks, exploit the systems, do the things that aren't supposed to be done. The difference is that this game was made by people who actually know what they're doing, and the cracks he finds are intentional, hidden depth designed to reward exactly the kind of lateral thinking he specializes in. The anime was produced by C2C, with character design by Ayumi Kurashima, known for Devilman Crybaby and Megalobox 2, and a soundtrack by Maneka, also the composer for Oreguru. That creative combination gives the show an energy and visual identity that stands apart from every other game world anime running at the same time. The boss fights in particular are on another level. The encounter with Weatherman the Tomb Guard is one of the most visually and mechanically creative action sequences in recent anime, and the show builds to it with enough patience that the payoff genuinely lands. Mashle, Magic and Muscles. Mashle is operating in pure parody mode, and it never apologizes for it, which is exactly the right call. The world is a thinly veiled Harry Potter pastiche, magic school, wand-based casting, house rivalries, the whole setup, except the central joke is that the chosen one of the story has absolutely no magical ability whatsoever and solves every single problem by being so physically strong that magic is simply irrelevant. Mash Burn Dead does not adapt to the magical world. The magical world adapts to Mash. And the way the show escalates this joke is genuinely impressive. It starts with Mash punching away spells and gradually works its way up to Mash punching concepts. Mash punching enemies so fast that the physical force creates magical effects. Mash treating the final boss of a given arc with the same mild inconvenience he'd treat a broken vending machine. The comedy works because the supporting cast and antagonists play everything completely straight. They have intense magical rivalry drama, complex power hierarchies, elaborate schemes, and Mash walks through all of it like it's a light jog. The anime is produced by A1 Pictures, the studio behind Sword Art Online and Lycoris Recoil, which means the animation budget and quality are consistently strong, and every absurd action sequence gets the visual treatment it deserves. The script comes from Yusuke Kuroda, who wrote all 6 seasons of My Hero Academia, and the music is by Masaru Yokoyama from Fruits Basket, 2 names that know exactly how to make a shonen feel epic. And the second season? The opening Bling Bang Bang Born by Creepy Nuts became a full-on cultural moment. If you haven't seen the internet lose its mind over that sequence, you've been offline. Ragna Crimson. Ragna Crimson earns its place near the top of this list by doing something that very few power progression anime manage. It makes you feel the weight of every step in that progression. Ragna starts out not just weak but specifically and obviously weak. He fights alongside Leonica, a dragon hunter of extraordinary ability, and the gap between them is played completely straight. He doesn't keep up with her. He struggles with things she handles casually. He knows it and she knows it, and there's a quiet sadness to his awareness of that gap. And then the future version of himself shows up and destroys all of that framing in one conversation. The Ragna that arrives from a future where everything went wrong is not the same person. He's been hardened by loss, sharpened by years of fighting an enemy that Ragna hasn't met yet, and he carries a grief that the current Ragna can only begin to understand. He passes along his power and his memories and disappears, leaving the present Ragna to carry everything forward. Produced by Silver Link, which also produced Misfit of Demon King Academy, and written by Diko Akeo, who brings the same tonal discipline she applied to Reign of the 7 Spellblades. The dragons in this show are genuinely terrifying and genuinely interesting. They're not just obstacles, they have factions, philosophies, long histories of conflict with each other. The antagonists are as developed as the protagonists, and the large-scale action sequences, especially in the second half, have an ambition and visual scale that almost nothing else in this genre matches. It's the anime on this list most likely to make you forget you're watching a power fantasy and just feel it. Undead Unluck. Undead Unluck might be the biggest surprise on this list for anyone coming in without expectation. It looks, at first glance, like a quirky rom-com with action elements bolted on. The premise sounds more comedic than serious. A girl whose touch causes catastrophic bad luck meets an immortal man who desperately wants to die, and they have obvious romantic chemistry. That's the elevator pitch. The reality is something much more ambitious. The world of Undead Unluck runs on a concept called negators, people whose existence denies a specific rule of the universe. Unluck denies luck, Undead denies death, but there are dozens of other negators out there, each one negating something different: strength, motion, sleep, reason, and the organization these people belong to is locked in a conflict with a higher power that has been cycling the world through repeated apocalyptic resets for longer than anyone can remember. The stakes, once they reveal themselves, are genuinely cosmic. The anime is produced by David Production, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, Fire Force, with the same core creative team from Fire Force handling direction and design. The soundtrack comes from Kenichiro Suihiro, who also scored Zero and Eminence in Shadow, and his ability to shift tone within a single sequence, from tense to melancholic to triumphant, is used to maximum effect here. Andy's power development in particular is one of the most creative things on this list. Being immortal and unable to feel pain fundamentally changes how someone approaches a fight, and the show keeps finding new and wilder ways to exploit that. The final arc of Season 1 is shonen storytelling at its absolute best. Zom 100 Bucket List of the Dead. Zom 100 works on a level that most zombie anime don't even attempt because it's not really about zombies. The zombies are the setting. What the show is actually about is Akira Tendo and the question of what it means to be alive. Specifically, what happens to a person when they've spent so long going through the motions of living that they've forgotten what it feels like to want something. Akira spent 3 years at a black company, the Japanese term for a workplace that exploits its employees to a genuinely abusive degree. 100-hour weeks, no overtime pay, a boss who screams at his staff, dreams quietly shelved one after another until the shelf is bare. He was functional but hollowed out. And then the apocalypse hit, and here's the thing. It freed him. No more company. No more commute, no more Monday morning. The world ended, and Akira's response was to write a bucket list. The power progression here isn't magical, it's psychological. Akira goes from someone who couldn't say no to anyone to someone who faces down zombie hordes with genuine enthusiasm, because he has finally remembered what it's like to give a damn about his own life. The anime was produced by Bug Films, written by Hiroshi Seko, the writer behind Attack on Titan, Vinland Saga, and Jujutsu Kaisen, which is a roster that should tell you something about the tonal range he's working with, and the music is by Yutaka Yamada, same composer as Vinland Saga and Tokyo Ghoul. The visual style is striking in a way that's rare for the genre: bright, oversaturated colors that feel almost like a vintage manga print against the decay around them. It's a show about freedom disguised as a zombie story, and it lands every emotional beat it reaches for. Kaiju 8 Go/Kaiju number 8, and we finish the list with the one that might have the most impressive production pedigree of anything we've talked about today. Kafka Hibino is 32 years old, and the show does not let you forget that. He's not a teenager discovering his power for the first time. He's a man who had a dream, failed to achieve it, accepted that failure, buried it, and built a life around the burial. He works as a Kaiju cleanup crew member, which means he arrives after the defense force kills the monsters and does the unglamorous work of processing what's left. He's been doing this for a decade. When a Kaiju parasite enters his body and triggers a transformation that turns him into a humanoid Kaiju with a threat rating that the defense force's instruments have never recorded before, it doesn't feel like a gift. It feels like the universe making a very complicated joke at his expense. He now has the power he always wanted to protect people, inside a form that would get him killed on sight by the very organization he dreamed of joining, while the person he trained with his whole life is now one of that organization's top officers. The production here is exceptional. Production I.G Ghost in the Shell Psychopaths handles the main animation, while Studio Kara, the studio behind the rebuild of Evangelion films, designed the kaiju, and you can feel the Kara DNA in every monster design. The script is by Ichiro Okuchi, creator of Code Geass. Character design by Tetsuya Nishio from Naruto. Opening by Youngblood, ending by One Republic. This level of creative assembly is unusual for a new IP, and the result is an anime that looks and feels like it was made with something to prove. Kafka's journey from cleanup crew to something that rewrites the rules of what humans can be in that world is one of the most satisfying protagonist arcs in recent shonen, and it's just getting started. Those were the 20 anime where the protagonist goes from absolute zero to a force you do not want to cross paths with. If I had to pick just one to recommend to someone who hasn't seen any of them, start with the Eminence in Shadow, then go to Undead Unluck, then Kaiju number 8. You'll thank me later. Drop a comment telling me which ones you've already watched and which ones you're adding to your list right now. And if I missed something that deserved a spot here, let me know. I always want to find more. If this video helped you out, hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. See you next time.